Hello and welcome back to Wind Your Neck In. After a short break, we're finally back going, and 2021 starts off with a strong guest. I'm your host, Niall Annett, as always, and in this episode, I'm delighted to welcome British and Irish Lion, Irish International and Ulster Club captain Iain Henderson for a chat. Hendy, thanks for jumping on, big fella. How are you keeping?
Great, Niall. Good to get finally catching up with you and finally get on this podcast.
Yeah, I know. You've obviously never heard of it before, but it is called Wind Your Neck In. So the usual question I ask anybody who is, well, Northern Irish in any way, shape or form. Phil Morrow was a cracking answer, but like in your life, how many times do you reckon you've been told to wind your neck in?
I don't know. Still living in Belfast here, like it comes across as definitely one that my family and on my wife's side of the family would use quite a lot. So
yeah, I absolutely love it. I love it, and it's brilliant when you have like people on who don't know the expression. They're like, "What does it mean? What does it mean?" It basically means you're being told to shut up or pipe down, like you're talking too much. Or
being over here, obviously, we have so many different expressions that we use over here, and you see people coming in. And my favorite time when it gets used is when someone is new at the club, and it could be a South African, and so they get told, "Shut up, wind your neck in," and they go, "What? What on earth are you talking about?" And the expression on their face is priceless because they're obviously doing something or have said something that they need to wind their neck in about. Yeah. And then when you tell them to do that, then they go, "What on earth?"
You can see them, the process that they're like, is that positive or negative? Is that, I can't really work this out. But well, I've certainly been told it many times in my life, but it's great to have you on, man. I really appreciate you jumping on. I know you're a busy man now, family man, and you're on your way back from injury, which is great to see. But I suppose, the content of the podcast is mostly based around high performance, and you're a perfect example of someone who, how do you phrase this? Has kind of turned their career into someone who's an extremely high performer. But we've known each other a long time, Hendy.
No, we have.
And in your early days, would it be fair to say you were running off a huge amount of natural and physical ability in terms of how you have turned your career around into being a British and Irish Lion, club captain for Ulster? When you allow yourself to reflect on that, how do you see it?
I do think it's very funny. I will never shy away from the fact that I have had to change and I've had to adapt to become a professional rugby player, because you know me, right from when I started out post schools rugby and into like sort of the Ulster setup, if you want to call it that. There's no way that Iain Henderson could have survived as long as he has now without changing in some way. Probably. And I think I'm definitely very thankful for the coaches at that time for seeing that in me and for sort of pushing that with me, because if they hadn't have done that, I wouldn't be where I am today. I do think that going back to where I was then, we've touched on it briefly before about how professionalism and things. We can always look back and say, "Oh no, the game's way more professional than it was then," and you do hear people saying that, and it is a bit of an eye-rolling comment. But I do think that now the young guys that we see coming in now are prepping themselves to come in and perform to top level from no age at all. And a really good example, and it was class the same. Dokie's son, Nathan, getting his first cap there the other week.
Yeah. Scary, by the way, though, isn't it? That Dokie's son's now
terrifying.
An Ulster player.
And did you hear the weird stat around it?
No.
11 years to the day that he was mascot for Ulster. They were playing the same team, Munster, and had finished the same scoreline, and he got his first cap. Really weird, like that's so weird.
See, that stuff freaks me out, though. That's like we're not in control of anything. There's a puppet master above us who's just controlling some stuff, and it freaks me out.
He just throws that in to be like, "Wonder if they'll notice this."
And there's a handful of people going like, "Oh my god, the Illuminati are real."
So yeah, I know. Like Dokie's fresh out of school. Young Dokie's fresh out of school. Neil Doak's definitely not fresh out of school. Young Dokie's fresh out of school, and he came in when he was 17 into the pre-season with Ulster and didn't look a pick out of place. If I look back and you've thrown me in as a 17-year-old, or maybe, I'm not sure, he could have been 16. No, he would have been 17. So he would have been 17. Throw me in as a 17-year-old into an Ulster senior pre-season. Like, I would have capitulated. I don't know what I would have done. And he handled it. He didn't look a bit out of place, and he was like, as a scrum half, and he playing a bit of 10, controlling boys, making the calls, calling the shots from that sort of obviously leadership role or like a position as a general on the pitch. And that was probably one of the first times that I had actually really been blown away by how talented the young guys coming through are. And there's those sorts of young guys are currently at Ulster. There's a whole litter of them, if that you feel like they call them that, and they're constantly impressing me. And it's good. It's so good for the whole system, and it's good for the senior boys because they go, "Jeepers, look at him! I need to get my act together." And
absolutely,
and the younger guys mightn't necessarily know that or understand the seniors to look at, but it's good. It's a great place to be.
Yeah, you want those young boys driving those standards. Keeps us on our toes now that we're old boys, But I think it's that training age. They've got this training age. They talk about training ages and strength and conditioning, about how, like, how many years you've been doing gym and how many years you've built up this training age at a professional level. And like, I'm not being funny, Hendy. Like, I reckon I could bench 100 kilos whenever I was in the Ulster Academy, and that was about it. And I know you weren't too dissimilar. You always had like this ridiculous strength from like your waist down, but these guys are coming in and they're throwing around weights that are just unbelievable. Do you think in any way it can affect their ability? Because the point I ask, right, is I know you had this when you first came into the Ulster Academy. It was actually touch and go whether you were going to pursue a career in rugby. You had this other side, this university. I think it was Maths. Was it Maths or?
Yeah, well, at the time I was studying economics and finance.
Economics and finance, yeah.
But it was definitely always a Maths background. I've been interested.
Always Maths, but you had that kind of like weird ability just to formulate numbers in your brain like super fast. And I remember the point of the conversation is I remember you thinking like, I'm not sure if this rugby thing's going to work out. I'm actually probably going to prioritize my university. These kids are coming in with this amazing training age. Their ability to success in rugby is increased, definitely increased on where we were coming in. But is it affecting their ability to, if and when rugby doesn't work out, or are they being given, particularly in Ulster, that opportunity to make sure they're balanced?
I do think the guys managing the Ulster Academy definitely push that. They say you have to have a good life balance. Where I do think it comes in really handy too, RPI, formerly Arupa, we've got more or less got a full-time player development officer who is constantly there touching base with guys, and it might be university, it might be a trade, going and doing a trade. And
absolutely,
I'd be the first person to say, like, university is not for everyone. Find what you enjoy and do it. Like, don't force yourself. And like, I think probably especially in rugby circles coming out of like decent schools, you get forced down the university route, and I don't think that's right. I'm a big believer in doing what you enjoy, and that probably stems back to similar to how I thought then. Like, this rugby thing mightn't be for me if it doesn't work out, and I'm not enjoying it, and it doesn't go well. But I do think they've got quite a good system set up to ensure that the young guys don't put all their eggs in one basket and don't have these false ideas, because the vast majority of academy players, not the vast majority, that could be wrong, definitely before that, have aspirations that they mightn't reach, and to get given a sub-academy position or an academy contract and assume that that's you made is completely the wrong attitude. And if anything, that's probably the attitude of a player that won't make it in the academy. If you're a good, hardworking academy player, well-rounded, trying to work hard not only in your playing game but also outside of that, socially as well. It's to me, it's the all-rounders seem to do better than people who put all their eggs in one basket and end up maybe more disappointed at the end of the line.
I agree. I think I was definitely in all eggs in one basket through the first kind of 5 years of my career. And I think the more I've diverged away from rugby with the same focus and intent in rugby, it definitely frees you up to just actually play better rugby. Probably just allows you to not take it, not let it build the pressure, build you down, and it becomes life or death, and it's not, like we're all gonna have to retire, us too, sooner probably rather than later. Hopefully a couple more years in the tank yet, Hendy, but it comes to everybody, and I think that's a really important point that you make there, that the all-rounders, the people with perspective, the people with context in terms of rugby ending eventually, do seem to do better in rugby and after it. But your education, coming through the mighty Belfast Royal Academy, who in fairness get dusted up every year by us methodly. Do you remember the year? I have to bring this up. I'm only bringing it up because it's not rugby related, but you remember putting Heaney's tooth through his gum?
Yeah.
Michael Heaney, the Worcester Warrior player here now, a good friend of ours. I'll never forget it. I don't think I'd ever seen you angry in your life. And then you turned around and chinned him and his tooth went through his gum.
That's it. Like, genuinely, I don't think I've ever been as angry in professional rugby as I was then. And I can't remember the exact. I do remember having an overwhelming anger. And like, me, I'm not an angry person. In fact, I'm probably the exact opposite.
Mate, you're literally the most chilled out rugby player I've ever seen. And when you did it, like, because we'd met each other a couple of times before that, I was like, Haynes, what have you done? Like, what have you done or said to annoy him? Because he's the most chilled out person on the planet.
I think it was probably the frustration of us being, I guess, about 45-0 down at that stage. And unfortunately, I am sometimes a wee bit of a sore loser.
Sometimes you are, but in fairness, you picked the big man to pick on. You picked wee Haynes and give him a dusting. But the reason I bring it up is a great attachment to Belfast Royal Academy, but an equally close association, with the Amateur Senior Rugby Club Academy, which I have to say, like, my club's Belfast Harlequins. You can say whatever you want. I have a real soft spot for Academy, and
we still talk about you. Every so often, Cormsy or my brother go, remember Nyler told us whenever he retires, he's going to come back and play for us.
Well, if I guaranteed them a year, I might be even worse than I am now, or I don't know if the body will manage it, but I'll slot in at 10 for the forwards or something.
Yeah, I'm sure they would welcome you with open arms.
But I suppose, I don't know why, right? I've got this real soft spot, and it probably is Cormsy, your brother Richard, and you, because we were pretty close back when we were going to that academy, that Ulster Academy system. But it's a proper rugby club, and the reason I bring it up is I'm interested to know, like, what sort of environment that was for you as a young man to grow up in. You talked in other interviews about going there on a Saturday and watching your dad play and stuff, and I just wonder what sort of example that set for you in terms of your love for rugby.
I think probably, to take a step back and look at it from the outside, it probably grew a real competitive edge in me, knowing where my dad played. In my head at the time, my dad was playing at, like, Flippy could have been playing in the World Cup final when I was going to those games. Yeah. And, like, knowing, and then my brothers, the eldest brother Stuart at the time, going and playing for the firsts after school, and then Richard going and playing for the firsts, and I was still in school, and I was like, flip, it was a natural pathway for me. And fortunately, my last year at school, I ended up going and playing, and I've played in the first, seconds, and thirds for Academy, all in that last block in 2010 before Ulster under 20s managed to get a hold of me. But fortunately, like, Ulster appreciate that at the minute, and there are players like myself. As of 2 years ago now, I think I'm signed to Academy. Will Addison is another example. His family are from Enniskillen, and he's signed Enniskillen Rugby Club, and it's great to see that. Like those clubs that might necessarily get all the recognition or back at home over here, like all the top end smaller clubs or amateur club sides, they don't get to see that. Whereas it means a lot to me to be assigned to Academy, and it's definitely when the program, when I was playing international rugby and you're in a home fixture and the program says club side Academy, like, that means a lot to me. Like,
absolutely. Growing
up playing for the Minis, family playing, Richard was captain for 3 years in a row there, and Dad's ex-president. There's so much connections there, and it's definitely means a huge amount to have that affiliation. And it's great. I was actually in the gym this morning with young Academy hooker Tom Stewart, who went through BRA and he unfortunately for him hasn't had the chance to play for academy just yet. But
hopefully he's lucky enough to do that.
Hopefully he will one day get to play for academy, but he still would hold similar feelings and affiliations to the club too, which is great to see. And I think it definitely says something about the school and says something about the rugby in the school.
Absolutely, couldn't speak highly enough about it as a rugby club. Good people, and good people make good rugby clubs. There's no hiding away from that. And I think, if we go slightly before that, Hendy, I want to touch on something for context of how we know each other. Do you remember the first time you and I met? I'll give you a clue. It's not
discus.
It's yes, exactly. So
I knew you had there. Yeah.
We rock up to this Ulster Schools discus event.
Another guy who was a similar shape to Ross Kane.
Yes, it was. I know who you're talking about. I can't remember his name, but we rock up and there's this absolute man child throwing the discus like it's a frisbee. And that's the first time we met. And I remember thinking at that stage, what a lovely, lovely dude, like nice guy. We meet, keep in touch through Ulster Schools, Ulster Rugby. We played some rugby together, and then we meet in the academy, right? And this is the point of the academy where I wanna start this journey. Okay. So we talked briefly before about your entrance into the academy. You were humming and ahhing. You've talked before about how you said to your dad, like, listen, what should I do? I kind of wanted to go overseas and do a degree, blah, blah, blah. Your dad convinces you to take that 1 year out and give it a go. Okay. When you come into that Ulster Academy, let's talk about the progression of you as a professional, because we touched on it earlier, and I think it's really important. What are some of the things within that first year that you struggled with, or some of the things that you found that you had to really lift your standards in terms of making this 1 year worth it?
I suppose when I look back at it, I probably, underage prior to that, I hadn't played a lot of. I probably had a bit of a chip on my shoulder. I thought I should have. I think I was always, as you have already alluded to, terrible in the gym. So a lot of the academy training was based around the gym and performance and numbers. A lot of that I was awful, like hideous at. So
but a bloody good rugby player.
but and that was probably a lot of towards my early academy days that I had a lot of negative associations with. Like, didn't like gymming, and as you get in a lot of academies, there'd be a lot of big gymmers, and I think probably turning that corner a wee bit. Don't get me wrong, I'm still not the biggest fan of the gym now, but I think at the time Kev was there.
Kev Geary, now strength and conditioning coach at Bristol.
Head S&C at Bristol, and he probably put me through my paces a good bit. And honestly, I think it was probably one of the best things for me. I think it was definitely I needed to be needed to understand what the hard work side of things was. I needed to understand the timekeeping, because as you know, like I would have been lax with that. I would have been.
I was surprised you were on time today.
A wee bit scatty. I would have been wrong kit, missing meetings, all sorts of stuff that you don't want in a rugby player. All those things that make a poor professional. I'm sure you could take a list, and I had a lot of them. And in that first year and first 2 years of academy, I'm almost certain that first year of academy went on to Irish 20s, which I'm sure you'll touch on in a minute. Yeah. I'm sure Mike Ruddock thought I was awful, like so unorganized. But those 2 years were actually made me realize that if I am to do this, these things have to change. And like I do think they have changed. That there are things now that I look back on and sort of laugh at and think, flip, how on earth was I doing some of that stuff? Like, but I do think that those key elements that make someone a good professional, I needed to learn. And in that first year, 18 months of the academy, I definitely learned those.
Right. So it's an important point. So, I mean, before we moved to the Irish 20s and the subsequent debut and stuff after that, here's a question for you then, because when you're in the academy, Hendy, right, you get judged pretty quickly. We know guys who came in and got spat out the system really quickly. You were lucky that you had, well, not lucky. You worked your socks off, Hendy. Like there's no doubt about it. You've worked for everything you've got, but you learnt your lessons quickly enough. That's how I would put it. At what stage do you think that, you're judging some people too early? Because you see in England, particularly in Ireland, there's a lot more people who come through these kind of curve systems. So you've got the likes of your Don Brands, who I mentioned too much in this podcast. You've got your Mark Thomas, who's at Worcester now. He's a loosehead who has been like through this weird, turbulent journey of professional, amateur, all sorts of rugby. In Irish rugby, is it unfair to say that if you don't go through an academy, there's very few people who do go on to be professional rugby players? Or do we allow for the Iain Hendersons, who maybe didn't learn his lesson when he's 20 or 21, but has the clear capacity to go and be a British and Irish Lion that you did have?
I do think that pathway through not going through the academy, you do see less and less people coming through that way. There might have been a couple that came through. Craig Gilroy in your year, he went off and played. It wasn't really in the under-20s. Went off and played Dungannon, lit the world on fire, and came through that way. That's maybe a slightly hybrid version. People like Andy Warwick, maybe. Again, another Ulster player.
Andy Warwick went away and came back in, but he did serve time in the academies. I'm talking about the one that sticks out with me in an Ulster context is probably Chris Henry. Chris Henry, I'm not sure about his involvement in academies as such, but he had to go away and serve years at Malone in All Ireland rugby before he even got brought into some of the games. And he went on to become a bit of an Ulster legend, if we're honest. As a player, I think sometimes fans don't appreciate what Chad did at Ulster, but he was the glue at times when I was there. He was the most hardworking bloke. He was brilliant off the field, as we both know, but he was the glue around the place. And for me, he came into rugby almost in the back door, professional rugby.
Fortunately, I'm still very close with Chad, and fortunately, Chad was around when I was younger. He was definitely one of the when I think of a player as a standout player who brought me through from when I was a young academy kid into becoming a senior player. He would be definitely right up there, maybe the top of the list of the ones who looked after me. And I do think it's frustrating that some guys slip through the net, and he's not the only one who slipped through, or he's not the only one who nearly slipped through the net. There are other examples, and I'm sure there are guys out there who just haven't got there, or just haven't maybe adapted quick enough. And you mentioned lucky there. I 100% think a lot of players who break through with a bit of luck. I was incredible, and you said, "Oh no, you're lucky." I was incredibly lucky at the time, and for the opportunity I got for my first cap for Ulster, and that especially that was the start of that 2012-13 season. There were injuries. Stevie Ferris was injured. Willie Falloon was out injured. And there was an opening in the back row. There was a couple of second row injuries too, and then made me, he can cover second row and back row. We'll stick him on the bench instead. And if those couple of guys hadn't been injured, I very easily could have had another year in academy and development. And I went, you know what, sack this off. And that happens, players, and that happens, boys. And there's a good example, a player who was in the academy there for a few years, young scrum half called Johnny Shearer. I thought Johnny Shearer was excellent in class, and he essentially made his own decision to say, you know what, this isn't for me. And that's fully all right too. Like I said, do things that you're enjoying. If you're not enjoying not accelerating or progressing loads, it might be necessarily be for you. And Johnny's incredibly intelligent, and no matter what he goes into, I think he will excel.
I just think that using the term lucky, in a podcast that's based on high performance, sometimes lucky can I think the term lucky can just degrade all the sacrifice and hard work that you did make. But there's no doubt, and I'm agree with you, people benefit from injuries, and you have no control over when you're injured or not. Well, you've a limited control over whether you're injured or not. So to say you've got where you are through luck feels a little bit of unjust for me, because I was there whenever you were getting up at 6 a.m. when you didn't want to, when we were in the gym and our hands were sticking to the bars. There's nothing lucky about that. That was just you doing something. Like, we know you're one of the worst people I've ever met in the mornings. So like, you made a conscious decision to get out of bed and go and do it. So there is elements of luck. I think it can be disingenuous to put it down to that. But I think if we kind of leapfrog then to that, most people will think your Ulster career started with that first start against Munster, where you scored that great try, bundling off Zeebs and whatever, and it was amazing. But for me, there was a point where I thought you had the potential to go the whole distance, if I'm honest. I remember saying it about probably not far after we'd finished the Junior World Cup, that you had the potential to go the whole way, because the Junior World Cup in Italy, that was the point at which I kind of stood back and was like, mate, that kid, like Hendy, was on. You and Tag Furlong for me were the two best players in our whole team. I massively underperformed. There was a few other players in their second year syndrome, which gets a few people in 20s. They underperformed to where they need to be as a senior player in underage rugby. So for me at that stage, I thought, like, he's got everything. Like, you were throwing English 20s players around the place. You were matching the South Africans. Etzebeth was in that team. Khaleesi was in that team. You were one of a handful who were matching them. So it didn't surprise me when we leapfrogged to that Munster experience. But at which point in your early career did you think, I want a bit of this? Like, okay, I'm now a year or two into this. I'm working towards that Munster game, or maybe it was before. But at what point did you go like, nah, Dad, thank you for giving me that advice. I want a bit of this. This is for me.
Genuinely, it was probably post that 20s World Cup. I didn't really enjoy the 26 Nations. I'd happily say that. That 20s World Cup, I got the opportunity to start. I got the opportunity to play. I felt I was playing well. And from then on in, I felt that probably a bit more confidence in myself than when I was playing, or I did get an opportunity for Ulster A or training with the seniors. Like, I was like, in my head, there was a huge gap to be filled, a huge sort of, what's the word I'm looking for?
Void?
There's a void, yeah, perfect word. A huge void between Ulster Rugby senior players and where I was at. And I think that 20 World Cup, maybe in my head, just sort of said, you know, that void actually isn't that big. Yeah. I could maybe jump across that void. And then I probably, from there, I threw myself into it. And very quickly, you know how quickly the season comes around. We're back in the 20s again, and I become one of those more senior players in the next 20s team. And the opportunity to train with the seniors and put yourself alongside people who you, in your head, had a pinnacle beforehand, and then say, you know what, I'm actually alongside you here, and when I take a step back and look at it, I think I can be better than you. And it's having not an outward confidence, but an inward word with yourself to say, you can either let him do what he's doing, or you can go after that, and you can really chase him down and get after him.
So do you think, Andy, like, people can misperceive, I'm not sure misperceive's a word, people can perceive your chilled, laid back attitude for actually like, you're hugely driven, more competitive than you let on. Do you think that people can almost think, you know, in the early years when you were there, they were like, does this kid want it? But actually internally, with your inner voice, the conversations you're having with yourself sound completely different to that?
Yeah, no, I definitely. I actually kind of liked people thinking that I didn't care. I knew how much I cared, but when people were like, "Oh, he doesn't care," I was like, "Well, you think that, but when it comes to it, I'll show you how much I care." Or I know chatting with a lot of the senior players who would have been very senior then, later on in my career, they all got that, but when it came down to it, when it mattered, when it was in games, that was when they saw that I could perform, and I showed that I cared.
Yeah,
it was probably that was probably earlier on in my career when I didn't understand the value of showing that you cared more often.
So playing the game, playing the proverbial game within the game. So we know plenty of players who are fantastic at playing the game in terms of creating this persona that they we all know what it's like in professional sport and professional rugby. There's a lot of people who create the illusion that they're, doing everything and trying really hard and blah, 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 but then they don't have the ability to go and back it up. Did you think you had to go through a process of learning how to play that game?
Yeah, one that sticks out in my head, up in the White House at New Forge, I had an academy 1-on-1, and Niall Malone was there, and Niall's as frank as anyone can be.
Yeah.
And he said to me, we've got a problem with you, and I was like, oh God, I was like, this is going like the worst way at a 1-on-1. Might have been my first year in the academy, I think it was. He said, and then he paused for a second and said, we usually have problems with players. They train like Tarzan and play like Jane. And he went, it's the reverse with you. You look like you don't care about the place. You train terribly. You can't wait to get off the pitch. You don't turn up on time. But when you turn up to play, you play very well. And he said that for us, it's a in the grand scheme of things, it's a nice problem to have, but it's a problem nonetheless. And I remember sitting there being like, I suppose he's kind of right. Like when it comes to a game, I know I'm going to perform, but and that was something that it took me a good few years after that to really try and turn that around.
Yeah. So the Irish camps surely are an opportunity. We segue slightly smoothly on there to those first Irish camps, and then I suppose, topping it all off in 2012, November Test, you make your debut against South Africa. And I think surely those Irish camps are the point at which you cannot fake it anymore. You can't pretend like you're enjoying training. You can't, because it's like senior international camps. They're recording everything. They're judging everything. And by that stage you're in, you've bought into the dream of being a professional rugby player. You want it. You're more introverted about your determination and how much you do than extroverted, which is perfectly fine. But you can't hide it in Irish camps, Hendy. So how do you start to try and manage yourself through those towards getting your first cap?
Again, I got my first cap through a few guys who've been injured. I was in camp. When I first got into camp, Declan McKinley met with me. He's like, we're bringing a few young guys in. We're going to see how yous are going, see how yous are trucking along. It was probably the first time I'd been thrown in with a load of new players. Like when you're in the academy, you see the seniors there, you train with them, bits and pieces, you pass them in the gym, the physio room, you get to know them gradually as you get into it. With an Irish camp, it was like, right, 4 provinces, stick them together. There you go. You're all best mates. Let's get going. And that was probably that probably sparked something more in me that you had to I don't know. These guys have to prove something to them. They think I'm just this. Unfortunately for me, I think I have the number 12 or 13 in my head. Ulster players in that specific squad. There's loads from Dan Toohey to Declan Fitzpatrick to Paul Marshall. All the other ones that would have been there as well, like Chad, Rory, Best, Tommy Trimby, so many of them, Cavey. So that actually made that transition a lot more easy for me. I had a large base of people, and I do feel there's some times that I would see going into Ireland camp sometimes now, guys who would come in mightn't have a lot of their guys home province. Eric O'Sullivan's a good example of one who just came in there and got his first cap recently for Ireland, and there were only maybe 3 or 4 Ulster players in there. And I do think that I can fully understand why that would be a relatively daunting environment to be in, not knowing anyone. And the last, you've got so much on your plate to get over. You've all your lineouts, your attack calls, your day to get over. Never mind getting the meetings on time, mingling with people, ensuring you're performing at training, talking to coaches that you've never spoken. There's so much, you're under so much pressure. So the more you can ease that player's pressure, make him feel more at home, make him sit back and actually enjoy the experience rather than being stressed out and anxious about it 24/7, I think is massive. And looking back, that was a massive thing for me in that first camp. Having those other players there made me feel a lot more comfortable, even though I hadn't known them for a huge length of time prior to that. But going into that and then hearing, actually, funny enough, I got my first cap and swapped jerseys with Marcel Coetzee. He was the number 20 for South Africa.
Class.
we swapped jerseys, and obviously I've got to know Marsh really, really well now. That was a really interesting turning point in or fact from that day.
Yeah, it's crazy that you meet him so many years later, become good teammates and probably good mates with him.
Yeah. It's like it's so bizarre. It's one of those things again, like you said at the start, like there's someone playing and has us all as puppets.
Mate, I swear I have the same thing. There's from the 20s World Cup we went to, there's a handful of guys that we played against there who I'm actually playing with now. A guy Nick Shearer.
There's actually one. Yeah, Richard was out in the beard with his dad.
Yeah, Pete and Suzanne. Oh my god, I need to get that right. Hold on, sorry. This is where I'm going to edit it. I can't get his mum's name wrong, or else I'll be fucking exiled.
Richard went out drinking with their parents.
Mate, steaming. Like they still talk about them. Yeah, so Peter and Sue Shawnert, like they are two of the best people in the world, and you should see the pictures they have of all the lads drinking with those two, and then years later, Sharky, as he's known, Nick Shawnert and I, Joey Worcester the same year. It's just such a small world. And it's nice that you can kind of touch base with these people years after you're competing with them,
I know that's probably one of the nice things that you see happening in smaller amateur clubs, and it does happen. It does happen up towards the top levels too. Definitely, people's paths crossing and interweaving through careers, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, so let's touch on that South African game, your debut. Nerves in the build-up, were you pretty chilled? You're a pretty chilled person in general, but what was the build-up like for you? And do you remember running onto the pitch and any kind of significant thoughts?
Yeah, I've had a few thoughts prior to this about people running onto the pitch. Obviously, you're incredibly nervous. Massive deal for you, massive deal for your family, everyone you've played with, all this. And I've always thought, like, there's bound to be at some stage someone's going to just like faint run onto the pitch.
Imagine.
Or trip or something like that, and like if it hasn't already happened, it's going to happen soon, or at some stage, and that's ran through my head whenever I'm doing stuff like that before. But no, it was great. Actually, I ran on the pitch with Big Donners. We came on at the same time, and he has this. I'm probably sure you've noticed, he has this thing about running onto and off the pitch at top
fast
speed
as well. Yeah.
And so I'm standing there like waiting to come onto the pitch, and then they're like, right, that's you. And then Donner tears off away and like takes off. Where's my run over? So I've done like a 50-meter sprint. And I think Rian was actually playing that day too for South Africa. And he came on, he was like, Hendy. And then like I was like, like all nervous, and he's like sitting as chilled as he ever is, and like, I just had to really try and really enjoy it. They ended up winning that day, but it was I must say it was a really enjoyable day. There were a few first caps then. I think Rickard Strauss got his first cap, Michael Bent too, maybe even Dave Kilcoyne. But it was a really good day, and again, really thankful for that opportunity to experience that with those different people.
Yeah, tell me, is there an initiation when you make your cap for Ireland? Maybe you can't say, but there's definitely one with England where you end up having a drink with every single member of the squad. Is it similar?
Yeah, every member of the squad buys you a drink, and you drink it together.
You get some good people and some dickheads, don't you? You'll get some.
Donica Ryan ruined me. Donica Ryan ruined me. He was the end of, well, not the end of that night. But
you've got hollow legs as well. We'll get to that later.
Somebody, I can't remember who it was. I thought it was Cian Healy, but I asked him recently and he said it wasn't. Someone bought a bottle of red wine and was like, "Here, there's your bottle of red wine. Here's mine." And he pinned it. I can't remember who it was. And pinned it, and I was like, "What on earth is going to happen to me tonight?"
Someone just put me in bed. Just make sure I get to bed.
Yeah, no, it was great. That we ended up, it was done. So obviously there were a good few there were 3 or 4 first caps, and so there'd be like 5 bottles of wine. The guy who bought them, and then one for everyone else, and it was like
Bet you they weren't a fancy bottle of red though. It was like the House Merlot or something, was it?
This is the cheapest bottle they could get behind the bar.
100%. He's buying 5 or 6 of them. There's no chance he's buying the fucking Hotel Chocolat version or whatever it's called, or Rep 19 Crimes or any of those fancy ones.
Yeah, no. It was I think it was a variation of all the drinks. Some people were nice, and even at that, like when I've done it to other people, I want to be nice, but then you're like, oh, nah, I just can't do that. Like, I can't let you away with that.
Nah, it's not in you, mate. I've drunk with you before, and it's not in you. You, like I said, hollow legs. So we, so I'm keen to touch on something before we move. Obviously, Paul O'Connell's been announced this week, or I think it was the tail end of last week, as the new forwards coach. So I'm imagining, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, tell me if I'm wrong, but when you first went into camp, he probably had a big influence on you in terms of your ability now that you're a full line-out caller. Calling probably wasn't something you came into professional rugby with the ability to do. Again, correct me if any of this is wrong. But his influence on you, I can imagine, was quite big. So moving forward with him now coming back into the setup, you must be excited to get back working with him again.
Yeah, I've been... Within the course of the last week, I've been chatting to Paulie a couple of times already. He's really keen to get back involved. I think he's got a mad love for rugby and an even madder, weirder love for lineouts. But it's great to have him on board. I love playing with him. I hated playing against him. And that's something that always sticks out in my head. That's one of those questions that always comes up. Who's the toughest player you've ever played against? And yeah. There's a load of generic questions, but he is mine. Probably, probably not from the first time I played against him, but then when I played with him, and then you realise how destructive he is for you and constructive for his own team, and then you see that, and you see it actually unfolding in a game when you're playing against him. So for that reason. That's why I hated and loved playing with him. But it's great to have someone like that on board. Someone, especially the younger lads look up to. I know from when I didn't call lineouts how helpful he was for me for putting pressure on me to do stuff and get stuff right. In terms of calling, I think I probably didn't necessarily learn to call off one person in particular. It'd probably be a large mixture of...
You've had some brilliant teachers though.
Yeah, Johan Miller, Paul O'Connell, probably Dan Toohey a bit as well, Dev Toner, like guys,
a lot of good
Franco van der Merwe, like a lot of good guys, and to pinpoint one of them as that's who I've learned it from would be wrong. No. I think I've definitely picked up different bits along the way. And even now at the minute, we've got Sam Carter in our Ulster, who's an incredible line-out caller, and learning from him all the time as well. And I think that's something that has become more prevalent in me now, is that you can't ever stop learning. You have to continue to adapt and change what you're doing, otherwise you'll become stale and null and void.
100%. That growth mindset is a trend in all the best high performers, and it's a term that's kind of banded around a lot and stuff. But with growth mindset, looks like just constantly trying to improve yourself. So your improvement in the lineout's been huge. You were always a brilliant jumper, but your ability to go and call there, you're right. You kind of pick up these little bits. And when people ask me about that, like I learned so much off someone like Rory Best in my early years, but then you do like mix that pool of people like Gus Creevy and whoever else is big influences. So I can see that in your play, Hendy. But I think through those Irish involvements, like you've got high 50 caps, you've had a brilliant career to date with loads more in the tank. Some of your best times, you've had some great success with multiple coaches. I think when you have those really big highs, does that inspire you and drive you to constantly want more of them?
Yeah. I think if anything, when I have the highs, it reminds me of frustrations of why I haven't had them at other times.
Yeah.
when you have a high, like winning something or winning a game away from home, like there's a few games. Most of my best memories of games are winning away games in England and in European Cup, like winning away at Leicester or away at the Stoop, like those games, or away at Saints, like those games there are some of my like best memories for Ulster, like when you're crammed into a terrible changing room and it's a terrible night. The one against Harlequins in my head, it was a snowy night, the snow one, like those are games that like I look back on and like those are some of my best memories. And then you relish those memories, and then you look back on other games and you're like, flip, we really dug in that night. Like why couldn't we have dug in this game that we've lost?
Yeah.
And I suppose when you look at it that way and put it that plain and simple, if I had an exact answer, I would fix it immediately.
You'd be the captain and the coach and best player in every team in sports in the world. It's not an exact science, is it?
Yeah. And I think the trying to sorry, my brother's called me there. Trying to pinpoint that is something that I think you have to continually try to do. Why were we good that night? Why did we perform then and not perform in this night? What did we do differently? Was our prep different? You can get caught up in a lot of that. You can get caught up in trying to chase things that you think have changed that haven't. But it goes back to that growth mindset about trying to continually get better.
Yeah.
Rather than after you win 2 or 3 good games in a row, you sit back and go, you know, we've done it. We're not going to lose any more games. That's an awful mindset to have that I think can slip into teams and players. You see the best teams like the Leinsters and the Saracens who are continually driving each other, and a lot of those within those teams, there's a lot of players who are constantly pushing the other players. Yes, the team looks this team and the standings look comfortable, but that starting team is constantly like bubbling, brimming, players trying to get through and solidify their name in this top range team.
Yeah, we had a guy like Richard Wigglesworth, for example, who during his time at Sarries talked about how high performing elite performance teams are actually an uncomfortable place to be, because you're constantly being challenged and challenged and challenged, and if you're not good enough, gone, you know, you have a certain level that you have to reach. So I think the way you describe it there is perfect. It's that constant continual intention to get better. But we talk about the highs and the lows. You've reflected on some of the, you know, Henry, you've got like 3 Six Nations, a Grand Slam and a Triple Crown with Ireland. Like you've had a successful career in that aspect. But if we flip it, it's the old Irish question that we all love to ask ourselves. You've been to 2 World Cups, 15 and 19. And, you know, we had an amazing discussion with Donica about it, why they just couldn't get those performance levels in World Cups. Have you ever reflected on that, looked back on it, that 2015, 2019 World Cup and asked yourself those questions? Maybe, you know, we're not, well, hopefully we're a couple of years away if everything stays to plan, time frame wise, into 2023. So what's that looking like building towards it?
I think it's exciting. A couple of years ago, we were playing, this is a completely off topic, but along the same lines. A couple of years ago, we were playing Connacht at home, and I was in the press conference beforehand, and one of the guys with me, Connacht haven't won in Ravenhill, Kingspan for 44 years. And my response to that was, well, they're going to win soon then. like things like that don't last forever.
No.
And probably wrongly in my head going into the last World Cup, I was thinking that. I was like, flip, if there's a year that's going to end, if there's a time that we're going to get this semi-final, we're going to win our quarter-final, it's this year. Like, we're going well. We just, last year in 2019 and 2018, won the Grand Slam. The team's there. The players are good. We have a good coaching setup. But then when it came to it, Japan put all their eggs in the Irish game, and we probably overlooked that one. We looked at it as a game where it'll be difficult, but we will win it.
Yeah.
Which was wrong. And
that's probably how I, as a fan, looked at it. As a fan, I was like, that's going to be a tough game. We'll win that, but then the real eyes on the bigger one that's just slightly down the road.
I think all of World Rugby was probably thinking like that. And similarly, on the flip side of that, Japan had a big game last World Cup. They beat South Africa.
Yeah.
Are they going to produce two big games? But they did. They did it against all odds. They've turned over two big rugby nations. Fair play. Like, I think Japan are very well drilled, and they're a good, very good team. I know that now. And in the 2015 World Cup, we had an incredible pools. I felt like we were going into that last game in the pool. I was like, we are flying it here. We've beaten France.
Yeah.
Someone actually said it, that France we've came through and we've had barely any injuries. Like, this is unheard of at the World Cup. And then that France game, I don't know how many people got taken out between Johnny and Paulie. Everyone's kind of like
Pete.
Like, so many just got chopped out.
I was actually at that game where Claire and I got tickets to the Millennium Stadium for that, and it was like, afterwards I was shell shocked. I was like, I can't believe what's just happened, because I was like, Paul O'Connell, I'm pretty sure he's done something pretty significant there. Now, granted, he'd ruptured his hamstring off the bone, and he was still like hobbling back into the defensive line. I heard KV talking about it on a different podcast through the week there, and he couldn't have summed it up any better. That's the testament to the man. But I was like, there was just so many big players had big injuries in that game. It felt like, the bodies were just starting to break.
That had an impact, evidently, on the squad. Unfortunately, and as we know, years prior to that, we had beaten Argentina relatively comfortably out of World Cup, and Argentina are one of those teams that flick a switch come World Cup time and put out big performances. Obviously a very emotional team, and they get themselves going, and they did that day. And our defense, they remember them playing so wide. And really attacking the edges on us and making ground like for fun. But frustratingly, that was the end of the 2015 World Cup, and obviously the 2020 World Cup we had it set up to, had we beaten Japan. Obviously, you want to play New Zealand. You're going to have to play New Zealand at some stage if you want to go the whole way. But they were much better than us on the day, and probably after the deflation that losing to Japan caused us, unfortunately, with hindsight, probably seems like it was the end of our World Cup, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, we're building towards that 2023, and I'm sure it'll be a different story. And you're always learning, always reflecting, and there'll be time to put in place. You'll be a senior player, a really senior player by that stage in the Irish setup. So, I think as we look to round up that kind of aspect of the Irish and your progression through the Ulster into the Irish setup and stuff, like, do you have a pretty solid idea of what your week looks like and what you need to get done in that week to prepare yourself to go and play your best rugby? Do you feel like you've got to that stage in your career?
Yeah, we've got several different week structures, depending on what day the game's on, depending on the time of the season, what days you're going to be training, and we'll know from a fair bit out what type of week we're going to have that week.
So I know, like, most rugby teams have those kind of structures, but I mean more individually for you. Do you have I know guys who are like, I have to do lowers. I have to do like a heavy lower session 7 days before the game, because if I do it any closer, I'm in danger of feeling a bit sore. Some boys like to make sure they're getting loads of posterior chain work done. Some people like to do, like, I personally don't throw a lot throughout the week. I'll throw like a little bit every day, and then I'll do 6 throws on game day, and that's it. Like on the morning of a game, I throw 3 on either side, and that's it. Because if I throw any more, I'm almost psyching myself out. The work's done. So you personally, like, say you come in on a Monday, the game's on a Saturday. Is there anything that you think like, oh, I just got to chip this off the next day? Because coaches are funny. Like coaches are like, well, you have to defend them all on a Tuesday. Like, is there, you know, every team does it. Every team defends them all, attacks them all, and scrums on a Tuesday, because it's that idea of, you know, your week's planning, preparation. There's a term for it. Can't remember. But for you personally, do you like to do an upper body session 2 days before a gym? Do you like to catch a few lineouts the day before a gym? Captain's run? What does it look like?
Physically, not a huge amount physically, but I have a lot of things I check off in terms of meetings, in terms of my line out calling, making sure we have specific walkthroughs done in days.
Yes.
And sure, like I have a bit of a process around if things aren't right in one walkthrough, what I want to get through in the next day's session, making sure that what we get through in the week and what we have said we're going to do in meetings, I could get a wee bit anal about making sure that gets done. Not so in that aspect I would be quite strict on myself about lineouts, ways I write lineouts out, different almost wee revision sessions I'll have on my own around the lineout and around whatever opposition we're playing, going through our plays, going through defensive points. I have checkpoints like that, but all my things I feel to get me ready for match week are all things like that, rather than like a physical gym session or physically doing something. I'm a massive believer in people being in roles for a reason. I have put full faith into our athletic performance staff. That I'm as open with them as I can be, and they're as open with me as they can be, and their sole aim is to make me feel good come match day. And I am more than happy to be like, right, you guys this is your job and you're really good at it.
It's their expertise.
You can sort me out on that. And the current staff have built a real good player staff relationship that again is constantly being worked on, constantly getting feedback, putting in and out, and seeing what works for guys, what doesn't work for guys. Again, ultimately to make people feel better. Yeah, that's a massive driving point for the Irish S&C. Jason Cowman, before almost every session you're in, he says you're in here to A, to make you feel better, and B, to make you perform better the weekend. You're here to get better. And if you leave a session feeling, oh, jeepers, I'm a bit sore, and I should have done that extra set, or should I have chopped 1 or 2 off, like, you want to be leaving with a feeling like you've got better, feeling like everything that you're doing in your day is to make you perform better come match day. Yeah,
it's a great way of looking at it. It's a great way of looking at it. It's probably a modern kind of intention with the way rugby's going, you know, because you can easily tick boxes. There's nothing I hate more than ticking a box. If someone can show me something and be like, right, this is what you've got to do, this is what we're doing today, and this is why this. But if you're like, okay, today we're doing this because, well, that's what we've done for the last 10 weeks, I'm going like, no, this is going to kill me. So 100%. I think it sounds like it's a great setup you guys have. And I think if we kind of divert slightly away from the actual ins and outs of how your week looks, Hendy, something that I was keen to discuss as well is like this idea of living your career in the public is quite difficult now. Like, you're on a different level to me because you are an international British and Irish Lion. I already kind of have a good idea about how this part of the chat's going to go, in that I don't think you're scrolling through social media looking for like Tom, Dick and Harry or Steve the Plumber's perception of how you've played, right? But is it more difficult whenever potentially it's your family who are reading some things on social media about how someone's giving you a rating in a newspaper who doesn't have a clue about rugby? Or how do you deal with that, and how do you advise your family to deal with that?
Yeah, I do think bringing family into things definitely is a huge emotional driver for probably almost everyone. And that's something that I would think about a lot before a game, thinking about how would you like your family to feel about your performance? How would you like to be how would you like to be portrayed? But in regards to social media thing, I would be one, and you know me, I hate conforming to anything. I hate like someone telling me to do something and having to do it. So ironically, about a year ago, or whenever that documentary came out that everyone raved about, the social
oh yes, the one on Netflix.
Social dilemma.
Social dilemma. Yeah.
Came out, and I looked at it, and I've been kind of looking for a reason to sack off social media. I was like,
there you go.
And I was like, perfect, this thing. But in it show, I knew that whole show was like pointed towards social media is bad. You shouldn't use it as much. And in accepting that, I was conforming. So in a way that's like Kyle.
It's a double-edged sword, mate.
Exactly. So then I reckon probably last pre-November series or Autumn Nations Cup or Six Nations or whatever it was called at the time. So pre-November, pre-October, I reckon August time, I deleted all my social media apps and haven't got them back since, and I really enjoy it. I'm actually Suzanne logged into her phone, and she'll occasionally put up a post for me just to kind of keep some sort of presence out there. No,
I think it's important. It's a really difficult balance. Yeah, it's a difficult balance, so Hendy, because like it's the way I treat social media, and this is, I mean, it's the truth. So I suppose I have to say it's a tool for me. It's not like I don't find myself scrolling through social media looking like, I don't have TikTok. I don't use it as like a form of entertainment. It's more like a tool. It's more like it, because you have to acknowledge that there's a presence for you to have. There's a platform that you have. You being an British and Irish Lion, Irish International, British and Irish Lion, like you have a presence, and you should benefit from having that presence because of your stature. I'm not against that. So having Suzanne like log on and keep you present out there is not a bad idea. But so I struggle with this in our club a wee bit, Hendy, because we've a really young squad, right? We've got a really young, youthful squad. A lot of them have grown up with social media. So if you think about like anyone who was born in 2000 plus, right? They've grown up with social media. We've kind of adopted it, but not grown up with it. And I'm very conscious that a lot of these guys, right? Say we've lost a few games in a row, and these guys are like scrolling through social media, typing their name in to see like what Steve the plumber, as I mentioned earlier, is saying about them and their performance. It's almost like this gratification that they need from people that have opinions but necessarily shouldn't matter as much as they do. So I just think sometimes whenever you as someone who's on a bigger platform, it's not going to affect you, because I know you don't sign into social media, you don't. But like, for example, Richard, right? Richard is probably present on social media in some aspects, or he maybe reads a newspaper. If he reads someone saying something about you that they don't have the inside information that you can give to Richard, like, oh, why did they lose that line out? Well, actually, this is the line that we planned to call in that space because we were trying to do. They don't have that information. It can be more difficult for family. So like Suzanne, for example, might be present in social media and read someone saying that, oh, Hendy had a stinker at the weekend, and they've got no idea. So how do you balance your family's perception of what that looks like?
I'm trying to think of a scenario, because
you don't play many bad games, so you're fine. Like, you know, when you play, you normally play well.
It does happen when you go around the mum and dad's house for Sunday lunch, and they've got the Sunday Life sitting out, and they're looking at the ratings, being like, "Oh, jeepers, look at that."
You'd only have 4.5 out of 10 there, son. You must have had a stink, and you're like, I actually thought I played all right.
I think probably the way I would kind of manage it. Not that I ever feel I have to manage it. They know how I feel about what everyone else says, and they know, they have a good understanding that whatever anyone else says not that it doesn't affect me, because that's not true. Yeah. I try to let it rarely affect me. And I think I do think that social media has like you say, it's a good tool. It has so many benefits, and there's so many positives to it. I do think, however, there is a lot of negatives to it. I'm all for free speech and all whatever else, but the amount of people, like you say, Steve the plumber with his with his world-beating ideas on who should and shouldn't be selected, and how to throw a line out or how to catch a line out.
Does he have some tips? Because I could do with them.
not understanding that people do read these, and people read them, and just because they might be more in the public eye doesn't mean they're not susceptible to feeling bad about it. And that's something I would often say to players, like, you're allowed to feel bad about it. Like, it's like when you read a comment, a lot of players have had most players have had negative comments written about them, and it's completely normal to feel like a bag of shit after reading some of them, to sit there and be like, my God, but to be able to put yourself in perspective and then actually go back out of that comment, look at that person's profile and be like, hold on a second, what shoes are you in to be giving? But
that's the skill, isn't it, Hendy?
Advice? That's
the skill.
And I try and say that to people, like, take a step back from it, don't care about that. Like his opinion should have little to absolutely zero effect on how you go about your day, or more importantly, how you go about your job. Like, professional rugby players are professionals for a reason. There's been, like I said, touched on the athletic performance department at Ulster. There's a whole series of coaches and people whose job is to make you a rugby player. That hasn't happened by mistake. You're there because you're a good rugby player, and to have that undermined by people on social media is like, when you take a step back and look at it, it seems a bit ridiculous, but it happens to everyone. It's happened to me before. I've looked and I've typed my name into Twitter searches and I've read awful comments, and I've been like, maybe he's right or whatever, and you do feel down. You do feel down about it, but then when you get yourself out of that rut, you're like, actually,
perspective.
Yeah, exactly. And I think probably the one thing that I said there that I would like to get across is it's 100% normal to feel like that. Like if you didn't feel like that, there'd probably be something wrong with your confidence, that you're overconfident, that if it didn't affect you in some way.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You couldn't have summed up any better, Hendy. I think it's a very important message, particularly for, like I said, we're getting on a bit now, and you do see these young guys come through, and they've got to be able to learn that a good friend of mine told me opinions are like arseholes. Everyone's got one. Like, you have to be able to filter the opinions that you want to take on board. So as we move onwards, second last topic, we're going to fly through this one a little bit quicker than I'd like to, but I'm conscious of the time, Hendy. The Lions tour, right? The pinnacle of everyone's, the pinnacle of every single professional rugby player's career, right? I want just a few questions, and I want to know your feelings and thoughts through those moments, all right? Because the squad's announced. Give me a second, I've lost my spot. Right, yeah. So the squad's announced on the 19th of April, 2017, and your name's in it. Where were you, and what were your first feelings?
I knew the squad was being announced. I knew it was going to be on TV. I was sitting in my house, watching the press conference, watching the names roll up, and saw my name come up. Actually, rewind 15 minutes. I was cutting the grass, and Suzanne.
Who cuts their grass 15 minutes before the Lions are announced, mate?
And Suzanne goes, "Yeah, go quick, it's coming on." And then I went in and sat down and was like sitting there, and like genuinely, it's actually incredible. Just sitting there watching, being like, I wonder, is it? And it was, and I was like, class. And we turned around, we just hugged each other. And then she was like, "Oh, that's so cool, that's class." And then the phone started going crazy. And I went, "Right, I've got to go finish the grass here." And then went back out. And then that was like it was a photo that Suzanne took of me. And I don't know if she put it on, or I think she must have put it on social media. And it was a picture of me just like cutting my grass, wearing some weird old clothes, being like, "What did you do when you find out you've been selected for the Lions?" But like,
they never change.
People have joked about it with me before, and I was like, what sort of inhumane person would leave their lawn half cut and half uncut? Like,
I was just gonna say, like, that my OCD's freaking out whether you're gonna finish it or not.
I know, so like I just went out and like it wasn't a big garden, but I was just went out and just puttered along, finished off cutting the grass, and then came back in.
And so I'm glad we cleared up that you finished the grass, because that would have freaked me out. But Are you out there cutting it? Do you have a smile on your face? Are you thinking about the
Yeah,
excitement of
massive.
everything that's coming forward?
Genuinely, I made a point. I was not going to finish the graft. We went out there, and it was a nice wee moment. I was just on my own. Suzanne was buzzing inside. Her phone was going mental too, and she was delighted. And I was just outside. It was a lovely day, so it was. And I was just like pushing, like lawnmower, pushing along. And I was like just sitting thinking, flip, that's nice. That's come together. That's a nice surprise for today. And then later on that day, I ended up going into Ravenhill. And it was good to see the lads there too.
Awesome. I was as proud as punch whenever it was announced. I honestly felt like I'd been selected. I was so proud of you, and I think there will have been a huge amount of people who felt the same. Talk to me about the initial meetups, because I've thought about this in the lead up to chatting to you, and like the initial meetups must be weird. You spend 4 years kicking the head off these people. Some people you think are absolute bellends, and then you meet them and you're like, he's sound. The traditional ones. Everybody talks about Haskell as in he's like, oh, not Haskell, and then you meet him, and I've met him. Played against him and met him. He's actually really good lad.
Yeah, that was actually so. Haskell ended up getting called in late because Billy Vanapola obviously
to the shoulder,
got injured. Yeah, and I remember briefly at the time being like, "Oh, jeepers." Haskell, I only knew him from his social media presence. I'd never met him. I'd never spoken to anyone about him. And then the first time I met him, he was like an absolute legend, and we got on really, really well. I felt I got on with him really well on tour, and I really enjoyed his company, and that was kind of a massive surprise. Those initial meetups, they're weird, they're really weird, like, but good. Everyone's being overly polite. Everyone's shaking everyone's hand, nodding at each other. How you doing? And then you go into one room, and then you get fitted for this, and then you walk back out and you pass the same person again. And you're like, how do you do?
Have you had the blazer done yet?
Oh God, so much this stuff, isn't it? And then like it is as you would imagine it would be. Kind of funny, and then you see someone you know, and then the small talk starts. It's like, oh, first when you're playing the weekend, that was a tough game. How's the body? Is the body all right? And all the formality questions get ticked off. But then it probably didn't get normal until you have your first training session together. After you train,
I was going to say, is it training, or is it your first social event, like maybe a couple of beers or something?
Your social event, I think training opens you up to like a small window of people, and then when you're at a social event, it opens you up to whoever you happen to be drinking with at that stage, no matter irrespective of who that person is. Which I think there's like everyone in a rugby environment knows how much that matters. Yeah. However, there's no like definitive evidence as to why that happens. I don't think. You can't
quantify scientifically, or you can't. It's not tangible how much socializing, whether it's with drink or not drink. You know, some people don't drink, but have like, so for example, the best example is Donica. Like Donica never touched a lick in his life, but if he was at a social event, he was still the center of attention. He was still the life and the soul. But it's that bonding or that socializing away from rugby, you know.
100%. And I think the more you do that, the more you buy into it. And it probably comes back like I said earlier about you're doing it for like a thought in your head is doing it to ensure that you're doing your family proud. Yeah. And the more you get to know someone, you want to do more for them. Like you don't want to let them down. Well, that's definitely, I think, in a lot of rugby players' minds, you don't want to let people down. You don't want to your friends, your people who mean the most to you in life, you want to do the best you can for them. And the more you get to know someone, whether it be through a social piss up or spending more time with them or whatever you may do, that's why I think the best teams are the tightest teams, because those players are going to like work their asses off for each other, because he's one of your best mates. You're not going to let him down. Like you can't let him down, and that's why why it's so key.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's the beauty of what the Lions is. So last two questions on the Lions, Hendy. Joe Marler speaks candidly in his book, The Loose Head. I actually listen to the audiobook rather than reading it because I'm lazy. But a really, really good book. When he discusses some of the stories from the Lions tours, he speaks very candidly about yourself and Bestie, which I can completely agree with. Like I said earlier, hollow legs. Are those some of the best memories, or is it the winning games that stand out for you personally?
It's definitely a mixture, and there were like low points too. There are times you're out when you're out on tour, and I was thinking like, what on earth? Like, this is supposed to be amazing. This is supposed to be the best time ever. This isn't that enjoyable. And then before you know it, you're in the game and you're like, flip, this is the best time of my life. This is the best rugby.
Yeah.
This is the best crack I've ever had. And similar to the social media thing, it's okay. It's normal to feel like that. It's normal to have emotional highs and lows.
Yeah.
No matter what happens when you're away from your family. I was due to be getting married 2 or 3 days after I got back from the Lions tour. There's a external stress of that happening at home, like so much stuff going on, and like I was like the other side of the world.
Yeah.
Potentially out in the beer, Suzanne trying to ask me a serious question because it's 2 a.m. where I was. She was in the middle of her day planning stuff, and like that was a whole like different sort of
stressor
scenario. I felt like almost like I was living like 2 lives. When I was in New Zealand, and then the other one like transferred, and then Suzanne fortunately managed to come out. Suzanne flew out for 6 days or something like 6 days or something like that in New Zealand, but it was class to see them. But there are massive highs and lows. Obviously, not getting selected for a test game was like, that was pretty gutting for me. But similarly, there was another 20 guys in the squad who hadn't been selected. Yeah. And we all enjoyed each other's company, and through that common sort of
disappointment.
That's the perfect word I'm looking for. The common disappointment that we all shared, we had great crack together, and made some of the memories that equal some of the high points of the tour. Which I suppose, like, you know me, I'm like the last person to start like bombing rugby or anything like that, but that's what rugby's all about. Like, that's kind of like it sounds like such a pothole thing to say, but like it is. Like it is. Yeah. That's why I enjoy playing rugby. Like,
well, you do the same thing. Sorry to interrupt. You do the same thing whether you're playing for the British and Irish Lions in New Zealand or whether you're playing for Academy on a Saturday. 100%. It's all about, playing the match, giving everything you got, and then socializing and connecting with people afterwards.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's why that's that whole theme I was saying there about why people play rugby, and I think it's one of the best. I think it's definitely one of the best parts, if not the best part of rugby.
Okay, so the last question on the Lions, high or lows, you talked about them. Where does the draw of the series sit for you personally? You've touched on the selection, which I know will be a low, and it'll be a driver for the next one. Fingers crossed you're in the mix because you've got so much to give out there. But in terms of the actual result being a draw, does that sit as a high or a low? Because I know historically on paper, it's a result, it's a high, but being a competitive sod that I know you are, being part of an organization which is historical and based on winning tours, where does it sit?
Is it allowed to sit in like a middle zone?
You can sit wherever you want. It's your podcast, mate.
Because there were to lose the first game, and then to continue on in the fashion that it's the next two was like, it's so good to do. Like, so it'll be so easy to lose that first game and roll over and be like, yeah, we've got to win 2 in a row now, and actually go out, win the next one, and come as close as you can to winning the following one. It's so impressive. And so just take a step back and look at it that way. It should be a high. It should be like, that's a real achievement to do that, especially against a team like New Zealand. It's just one of the best team, probably close to the height of their performances, to do that. Then similarly, like, I remember looking at the podium being like,
weird,
bro, like, what on earth is going on here?
They're all like that.
They're all like looking at each other and hugging each other. And
Yeah, Kieran Reid
smiling
and Warburton, wasn't it? Kieran Reid and
Yeah.
Warburton was the weirdest thing. They were both so uncomfortable. Two of the highest performing players in rugby's history, and they're both just like, oh, this is uncomfortable.
Yeah, like I was like pretty pissed at the time. Actually, I was like watching it, and I was like, "What?" Like, that kind of took a wee bit of the emotion out of it, and I actually found it a wee bit not funny, but I was like looking at it and like, "What on earth was going on here?"
It's weird. It was weird.
It was odd, but that was all. That was fine, and everyone ended up socializing afterwards, and it was great. And we had a few days out there afterwards that were again some of the high points of the whole tour.
Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine. We'll talk about them off air because I'm not sure they're for podcast ears. But I think last topic, and we're going to cover this relatively quickly because I've taken too much of your day already, Hendy. But the last topic is one that every rugby player goes through, every professional sports player goes through, and it's the topic of injuries. And I've had my fair share of times spent out on the physio bed, and I know you have too. But I think it's an important conversation because people who listen to this will either be people in high performing environments or just fans of rugby and other sports. And to try and give some context on what goes through elite athletes' minds when they're out injured, either short term, long term, or in even longer term in terms of having to retire. We've known players who've had to do that. I think it's important to try and provide some context. I mean, you've had your fair share of injuries. You've also played, and you've played nearly 200 first class games. I mean professional games. If you combine all your Ulster, Irish caps and the Lions games, which I know don't count as test caps, but they're obviously hugely high performing games. So you've played a lot of rugby, but you've had your fair share of injuries. How do you process the idea of being injured or injured again in your mind?
Honestly, I think getting injured for me has become more difficult as my career has gone on. And I think that's maybe because, similar to we talked about earlier on, like you become more invested. I put a lot more into training and preparation for a game now, and I put a lot more emphasis on that. And I think that has made getting injured a lot more difficult. Because you know how hard you've worked to get to that point or to play in that game. And that makes it like more gutting when you get injured. I definitely think it does. Obviously, everyone can tell you it's part and parcel. Like it's going to happen. It's no matter what. No matter what, when you play, but there are very few players other than Dev Toner who don't get injured.
Good.
And I'm just sorry, Dev. Who go through a whole career with very, very little injuries. The way I go about it is you're got it for the first while, and then you've got to go and get scans, and you've got to have many people ask you the same question over and over again. Your whole injury process is the toughest thing I find about the recovery and rehab process. Is you back running yet? Oh, good. You're good. How's it feel? How long are you going to be? When are you going to be fit? And I know it's the best with the best intentions, but it's that question 20 times a day, 30 times a day, and that I find that harrowing.
Yeah.
But the way I try and scope out my injuries is you're allowed, and like I've said about two other things, you're allowed to be pissed. Like it would be abnormal if you weren't pissed off about it.
Absolutely.
It's having a way of accepting that and understanding that that's okay. I'm allowed to be like that. What can I do about it next? And whether or not that's your scan, finding out about your scan, what steps of rehab you've got to go through. The Ulster physio who I've worked most closely with, the minute guy called Chris McNichol. I'm not sure if you've ever come across him. He's brilliant, and he knows that whenever he says something to me, right, we're going to do this and we'll get running in 3 weeks' time. My first question will be, what about 2.5 weeks, or what about 2 weeks? Where can I shave off a week here, or where can I shave off, even if it's a session, like we're going to run you next Monday, can we actually do it on Friday instead?
Yeah.
Or can we do it a couple of days earlier? And he knows that that's my sole thing, is like I don't like being injured. I don't like being asked the question of when I'm getting back. I want this to stop.
Yeah.
And I want my body to you want your body to be at full health, and like that. Again, that's a normal thing. It's normal to be frustrated when injured. Like nobody wants to have broken parts of their body. The more people understand that and can, for want of a better term, like be at one with that. I hate that term, but the more you feel like it's acceptable, it's normal, and there's also a spectrum of players. Some of them will get injured once in their career. Some of them will get injured 30 times in their career. You are on that spectrum somewhere, and you do not, unfortunately, like you said earlier, within certain parameters, do not get to choose where you fall on that spectrum. You might be one of those guys who, unfortunately, get lots of injuries. Fortunately, don't get many injuries. And that's not for you to decide. The collisions at which you take the grand scheme of things generally aren't on your terms. Like you run into contact, but the ones that injure you, you don't try and injure yourself.
No.
So again, you're on that sort of spectrum of I don't get injured a lot or I get injured a lot. And unfortunately, I know I'm one of those players who gets injured. I'm in the top half of that spectrum who gets injured more often than not, and it's incredibly frustrating. But I've accepted that, and what I try to do is minimize the amount of time I'm out for.
Absolutely. So I think the nature of the position you play and the way you play the game will lend itself to you having those injuries. There's no doubt about it. Like when you're putting yourself in positions to carry off those like touchline rucks where there's a full defensive line coming to get you, like shit's going to happen and you're going to end up in positions where your body's compromised. I think it'd be interesting to know, like, if you could reflect on your career so far, like what's the hardest time through injury that you've had? Can you reflect on one in particular, or do they all just kind of end up blending together and being like like a necessarily bad baggage that you just carry anyway?
I've never really thought of it this way before, but so I've recently done my MCL, and post the game that I did it in, the Irish doctor said to me, "Have you done that one before?" And I went, "I'm actually not too sure. I don't know." And he went, "What do you mean you don't know?" And I was like, "I've done one of them before and I don't know which one it is." So the only thing about that now, I probably try not to carry any baggage with them. And
that's good.
And I know my hands, because I'm going to look at them and see which ones have had operations on them, because my fingers are an absolute mess, so they are. But the likes of that, or if I've ever rolled an ankle and said, "Is that the one you've injured before?" And I go, "Honestly, no, I'm not sure." I know which hamstring was detached because I've got a big scar across my arch for it. And I know which knees had cartilage taken out of it because there's scars from it, and which hips been overdone because there's scars on it. But
you don't, it's not at the front of your mind. You don't think or reflect back on times where it's been really hard. I think that's a positive, Hendy. That just shows that you've gone through the actual acceptance process. And
that you said there about times that were hard. I think throughout my time, I have a good rugby life balance. So when I get injured, I have a lot of distraction. My eggs aren't all in the rugby basket for me to get upset about. We're going right back to the very start of what we're talking about, like that. I feel that sort of welcome distractions. You get injured. Oh, flip! It's actually a bit of time that, I don't know if you're Jacob Stockwell, I've got a few Legos in the house I have to build. That's a fair bit of time I could put into that, or whatever else people do.
If you're Gilly, you're building houses, aren't you?
If you're Gilly, you're building houses, or if you're Jack McGrath, you're back down to Dublin to look after your bees, or Jack's taking on a carpentry class. Like the guys have good. It's good to have the good guys have good interests outside of rugby.
So what are yours? What are you doing? Last question, Hendy. What are you doing away from rugby so that in 5 to 6 to 7 years time, when you're ready and it's time to call quits, what are you looking to try and move into? Do you have an idea, or are you working on that?
Working on it. It changes regularly. there's times that I say, flip, wouldn't it be nice to be able to just like total log and just keep yourself ticking over with a regular daily job, like nothing really specialized, and then just like kind of be as free as you want. But I don't think that works for a lot of professionals, because we are highly strung, high driven people. That's the reason you become a professional, or that's part of the reason why you're able to get to that level. I don't know. Part of me, I like the challenge of like currently I'm doing my finals. Back to the whole, we didn't really touch on this, the studying side of things. I'm currently doing my finals in the maths and physics degree, which has taken a fair bit of time. One reason or another, which we can get into another time. But I like the thought of joining a business or doing something completely different and starting right from the very bottom again, and trying my best to excel at that. Like going in, I was talking to a CEO of a big company in Belfast recently, and I was talking to him about going in at a graduate level, and he said, well, they like to see everyone coming in, and they'll then judge you where you're at and move you to where they think you should be. I like the thought of that.
So not in rugby, Hendy? You reckon when you finish rugby, you'll move away from it, or can we see you as a future head coach, director of rugby?
I don't think I'd be a head coach or a director of rugby. Maybe no.
Hendy, I don't know. I think the way you've developed yourself, the way you come across now, it's totally different. There's a certain, if you think about the really good coaches that you've played under, like they're not always like straight down the barrel, the most professional, the most like organized. Sometimes the ones that get the most out of you are the ones that are the most personable.
Yeah.
The ones that connect with you the most, the ones that can motivate you, the ones that can make you see it from whatever their vision is. So I don't know. Like, listen here, I'm not pitching you into rugby. I'm just saying I wouldn't count yourself out because you like to sleep.
Well, I think no, I do like to sleep. I do think that I do see in my life after rugby. Rugby's obviously such a volatile sport in terms of your lifestyle, and how I've seen so many coaches come and go, and to have a young family too. It's a lot to ask for your family, and that's something I think that when I look at my friends and other family members, it's something I'm a wee bit jealous of. Even if it's what month are we in? I don't know, January. We've booked to go away somewhere in May. I'd be like, oh my goodness, I would love to be able to book somewhere to go away to. I don't care where it is, but we don't know that. Or in 3 years' time, I'll still be in the same job, and I'll still have my weekend off, or I'll be able to book a weekend off, and that's a lifestyle. Again, that I might get into something like that, and it might be awful.
You might hate it. Yeah.
You might hate it, but that's something that I don't know, and it's obviously a massive ask. Like, you moved over to Worcester and you've made an absolute, like, you've done so well over there, and it suited you. Well, it seems to have suited you really, really well. But for me, there's a bit of a fear factor in that, because I've never left home, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I get that.
And that's probably something that's really intriguing, but probably a bit scary as well.
Yeah, well, no, listen, man, I think the whole thing from start to finish, you've given so much insight. I know you're currently navigating your way back from that knee injury, which I'm sure will be. Well, I'm not going to ask you what stage you're at, because I know it'll just piss you off. But I think you're definitely going to be back on the other side of it before you know it. And I think, mate, the insight and the quality of information you've given there in high performance is huge. And I just want to say a massive thank you for taking the time to chat to us. A massive figure within the Ulster Rugby setup at the moment, and a regular Irish international, and hopefully a 2-time British and Irish Lion within the next, well, depending on when the Lions tours happen, but hopefully a 2+ time Lions tour. And yeah, I just want to say a massive thank you. Great to chat, and look forward to seeing you back on the pitch soon.
Thanks for having me, Tyler.